When we think about UFO encounters, we often imagine distant lights in the sky or peaceful contact with benevolent beings. But what happens when these encounters turn violent? What happens when people don't just see UFOs, but are physically attacked, burned, or permanently scarred? Today, we're counting down the 5 most disturbing UFO cases where ordinary people suffered real, documented physical harm that changed their lives forever. These aren't just stories, they're cases with medical records, hospital visits, and scars that lasted decades. Number 5. The Pascagoula Abduction, Mississippi, 1973. On the evening of October 11, 1973, 2 fishermen named Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker were enjoying a quiet fishing trip along the Pascagoula River in Mississippi. What started as a relaxing evening by the water would become one of the most terrifying abduction cases in UFO history, leaving both men traumatized and physically affected. According to their accounts, a blue, oval-shaped craft descended from the darkness and hovered just above the water. The craft emitted a buzzing sound that filled the air with an ominous vibration. Suddenly, 3 beings emerged from the object, creatures unlike anything from Earth. These entities were described as robotic, with grayish skin, crab-like claws instead of hands, and no visible mouths. Their legs appeared fused together, and they moved with an unnatural, gliding motion that defied human locomotion. The beings used some form of paralysis ray on both men, rendering them completely helpless. Hickson described feeling as though he was frozen in place, unable to move or resist as the creatures approached. The beings then lifted both men with their claw-like appendages and carried them aboard the craft. During the examination that followed, both men reported being subjected to painful medical procedures with scanning devices and probes that caused significant discomfort and fear. Parker, who was only 19 at the time, was so traumatized by the experience that he fainted during the encounter. When the men were returned to the riverbank, Parker remained unconscious for several minutes while Hickson struggled with temporary paralysis that lasted for hours after the encounter. Both men suffered from severe psychological trauma, nightmares, and physical symptoms including headaches and nausea that persisted for weeks. The physical evidence of their encounter extended beyond their immediate symptoms. Medical examinations revealed unusual marks on their bodies, and both men displayed signs of extreme stress and trauma that were consistent with their accounts. Parker's trauma was so severe that he withdrew from public life for decades, unable to cope with the ridicule and the memories of that terrifying night. Number 4. Betty and Barney Hill's Medical Nightmare, New Hampshire, 1961. The Hill abduction case is famous for being the first widely reported alien abduction in the United States. But what many people don't realize is the extent of the physical trauma that Betty and Barney Hill endured during their encounter on September 19, 1961. While driving home from a vacation in Canada, the interracial couple noticed a bright light following their car through the White Mountains of New Hampshire. What began as curiosity quickly turned to terror as the light revealed itself to be a craft containing beings with large black eyes and gray skin. The Hills' car was stopped and they were taken aboard the spacecraft against their will. During their examination, both Betty and Barney were subjected to painful medical procedures that left lasting physical evidence. Barney reported having samples taken from his skin and hair, procedures that caused him significant pain and left small scars. Most disturbingly, he described a painful examination of his genitals that involved the insertion of a device that caused excruciating pain. Betty's examination was equally traumatic. She reported having a long needle inserted into her navel as part of what the beings described as a pregnancy test. The pain was so intense that she screamed, and the beings had to place their hands over her eyes to calm her down. She also reported having skin and hair samples taken, along with scrapings from under her fingernails. The physical aftermath of their encounter was documented by medical professionals. Both Hills suffered from severe anxiety, nightmares, and what would now be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder. Barney developed a series of ulcers that his doctors attributed to extreme stress, and both experienced ongoing health problems that they connected to their alien encounter. The psychological trauma was so severe that they sought help from psychiatrist Dr. Benjamin Simon, who used hypnotic regression to help them recover their repressed memories of the event. Perhaps most chilling was the discovery of physical evidence on their bodies and belongings. Betty's dress was torn and stained with an unknown substance, and both Hills found unusual scuff marks on their shoes that couldn't be explained. Barney's watch had stopped working and never functioned properly again after the encounter. Number 3. Travis Walton's 5-day ordeal. Arizona, 1975. Travis Walton's abduction case stands out not just for its duration, 5 days, but for the physical and psychological trauma he endured during his time aboard an alien craft in the forests of Arizona on November 5, 1975. Walton was working with a logging crew when they encountered a disc-shaped craft hovering above the trees. Against the warnings of his co-workers, Walton approached the object and was struck by a beam of blue-green light that lifted him off the ground and apparently killed him instantly. His terrified co-workers fled the scene, certain that their friend was dead. When Walton reappeared 5 days later, he was dehydrated, traumatized, and bearing physical evidence of his ordeal. He had lost over 10 pounds during his absence and showed signs of severe dehydration and malnutrition. Medical examinations revealed needle marks on his arm and other unexplained marks on his body that were consistent with medical procedures. Walton's account of his time aboard the craft included descriptions of painful medical examinations conducted by grey beings with large black eyes. He reported being restrained on a table while various procedures were performed on him, including the insertion of needles and probes that caused significant pain. He also described being exposed to bright lights that burned his eyes and left him temporarily blinded. The psychological trauma was equally severe. Walton suffered from intense nightmares, panic attacks, and a fear of open spaces that persisted for years after his return. He reported feeling constantly watched and experienced severe anxiety whenever he was alone in wooded areas. The experience left him unable to work in forestry, the profession he had loved, and dramatically changed the course of his entire life. Multiple polygraph tests confirmed that Walton genuinely believed his account of the abduction, and the consistency of his story over decades has convinced many researchers of its authenticity. The physical evidence, combined with the testimony of his co-workers who witnessed the initial beam of light, makes this one of the most compelling abduction cases on record. Number 2. The Cash Landrum Radiation Incident. Texas, 1980. December 29, 1980, became a nightmare that would haunt Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum, and Vicki's 7-year-old grandson Colby for the rest of their lives. What started as a drive home from dinner in East Texas turned into an encounter with a diamond-shaped craft that left all 3 victims suffering from severe radiation poisoning. The family was driving along a dark country road when they encountered a massive, diamond-shaped object hovering above the trees. The craft was accompanied by numerous military helicopters, suggesting some form of government involvement or cover-up. The object emitted intense heat and bright light that could be felt even from inside their car. When their car stalled, Betty Cash made the fatal decision to step outside for a better look. She approached the craft and was exposed to intense radiation that immediately began burning her skin. The heat was so severe that the metal door handle of their car became too hot to touch, and Vicki had to use her leather jacket to open the door. The immediate physical effects were devastating. Betty's skin began to burn and blister within hours of the encounter. Over the following days, all three victims developed symptoms consistent with severe radiation exposure: nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and hair loss. Betty's condition was the most severe. She suffered from burns across her face and body, lost patches of hair, and developed eye problems that required surgery. The medical documentation of their injuries is extensive and disturbing. Betty was hospitalized multiple times and underwent treatment for radiation burns, eye damage, and severe immune system dysfunction. Her fingernails fell off, her hair came out in clumps, and she developed painful blisters and lesions across her body. Vicky and Colby also suffered from radiation-related symptoms, including hair loss, nausea, and immune system problems. What makes this case particularly compelling is the immediate and ongoing medical documentation of their injuries. Hospital records, photographs of their burns and hair loss, and testimonies from medical professionals all confirm that these three people suffered from genuine radiation exposure. Betty Cash eventually died in 1998 from cancer that her family believes was directly related to her UFO encounter. The victims sued the US government for damages, claiming that the military helicopters accompanying the craft proved government involvement. While the lawsuit was ultimately unsuccessful, the case remains one of the most thoroughly documented examples of physical harm caused by a UFO encounter. Number 1. Stefan Michalak's grid pattern burns. Falcon Lake, Canada, 1967. At number 1, we have perhaps the most disturbing and well-documented case of UFO-related physical harm: the burning of Stefan Michalak at Falcon Lake, Manitoba on May 20th, 1967. This case stands apart because of the permanent geometric scars it left on Michalak's body, scars that told a story of contact with technology beyond human understanding. Stefan Michalak was an industrial mechanic and amateur geologist who was prospecting for quartz near Falcon Lake when he encountered two glowing cigar-shaped objects. One of the craft landed near him, and Michalak's curiosity overcame his caution. He approached the object and even touched its surface, which was so hot it melted the fingertips of his work gloves. The craft had an opening that emitted brilliant purple light, and Michalak could hear voices from inside. He attempted to communicate in several languages, but received no response. When he stepped back from the craft, it began to rotate, revealing a grid pattern of circular exhaust ports on its hull. Without warning, a blast of superheated air erupted from these ports, striking Michalak directly in the chest. The force knocked him backward, while his shirt and undershirt burst into flames. The blast was so precise and powerful that it burned a perfect grid pattern into his flesh, a pattern that matched exactly the arrangement of the exhaust ports he had observed on the craft. The immediate aftermath was horrific. Michalak suffered from severe burns arranged in a geometric pattern across his chest and abdomen. He experienced intense nausea, vomiting, and disorientation that made his journey back to civilization a nightmare. Most disturbing of all, he began to emit a strange, sulfuric odor that seemed to come from his very skin, and smell that persisted for weeks and defied all attempts to wash it away. Medical examination revealed first-degree burns in a distinctive grid pattern that no conventional explanation could account for. The burns were too precise, too geometric to be accidental. Hospital staff documented the injuries with photographs that show the unmistakable pattern of circular burns arranged in perfect rows across Michalak's torso. But the physical damage didn't end there. For months after the encounter, Michalak suffered from recurring health problems, including weight loss, persistent nausea, and a mysterious illness that doctors couldn't diagnose or treat effectively. Most remarkably, the burn pattern would periodically reappear on his skin, even decades after the initial encounter, as if his body retained some cellular memory of the alien technology that had scarred him. The grid pattern burns became Mikulak's permanent reminder of his encounter, a geometric scar that told the story of contact with beings whose technology was capable of inflicting precise, controlled harm on human flesh. Medical professionals who examined him found no conventional explanation for the pattern or the recurring symptoms, making this case one of the most compelling examples of physical evidence for alien contact. Stefan Mikulak carried those scars until his death in 1999, never once changing his story about what had happened to him in the Canadian wilderness. The burn pattern remained visible on his chest for 32 years, a permanent testament to an encounter that challenged everything we think we know about our place in the universe. If these documented cases of alien harm have left you as unsettled as they should, hit that like button, subscribe for more disturbing UFO encounters, and share this video with anyone brave enough to face the darker side of extraterrestrial contact. The truth about UFOs isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it leaves permanent scars. Disclaimer: this video is based on public reports, eyewitness testimonies, and speculative analysis. Some details remain unverified. All interpretations are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only.